was Darth Nihilus? What was his backstory and what were his powers? Find out all about the Lord of Hunger in the first episode of Star Wars Lore. Darth Nihilus was a human male who reigned as the Dark Lord of the Sith during the era of strife following the Jedi Civil War. Before becoming a Sith Lord, he lost everything during the Galactic Republic War against the Mandalorian Neo-Crusaders. He survived the activation of the Mass Shadow Generator superweapon during the war's final battle at the planet of Malachor V, which surrounded the planet with a destructive spatial phenomenon known as a mass shadow. Experiencing the shadow that obliterated almost everything on and around the planet made Nihilus create Force energy. The affliction painfully ravaged his body while rendering him a wound in the Force. He was found by a seeker of these, the Sith Lord Darth Traya, who told him that she could teach him to feed his endless hunger. He accepted her offer of apprenticeship at the Traya's Academy on Malachor V, and over time, he became one of the three concurrent Dark Lords of the Sith. Together, they formed a Triumvirate with Traya at its head and her other apprentice, Darth Sion, as the third member. The trio chose individual names for themselves, with Darth Nihilus becoming the Lord of Hunger. The apprentices grew in strength during their training and eventually overpowered the Master. Sion defeated Traya while Nihilus zapped her energy. Before the two Sith exiled her and combined their powers to sever her ties to the Force. Nihilus's affliction developed to the point where the Dark Lord was forced to call upon the dark side of the Force to encase his spirit within his mask and his armor to stay alive. Sion then began a Jedi purge, causing the virtual extinction of the Jedi Order. Nihilus was responsible for the devastation of the planet Katarr in 3952 BBY, killing and absorbing the Force energy of the Jedi at the Enclave on Katarr, along with every other living thing on the world, except one Marluka Ruvan named Visas Mar. Mar was collected from the surface, and Nihilus began to train her as his shadow hand. 1 year later, Nihilus sensed a growing presence in the Force, and sent Mar out to eliminate it. That presence was a female Jedi, Mitra Surik, who was on a quest to find the few Jedi Masters who had survived the Purge. When Mar attempted to assassinate the woman, Surik defeated her and convinced her to turn the light side of the Force in the process. Although Nihilus returned to lurking the fringes of known space, the man was eventually tricked by Traya into initiating the battles of Telos IV, in an attempt to absorb the Jedi Academy that actually lacked any Force sensitives, aside from the headmistress. Nihilus met a large fleet comprised of the Republic and Mandalorian forces at Telos that distracted him while his flagship, the Ravager, was secretly boarded by a small force consisting of Surik, Mar, Mandalore, the Preserver, and his Mandalorians. The trio confronted and slew Nihilus in the unsung duel, while the Mandalorians rigged the explosives that destroyed the ship. The Sith Lord's armor maintained his spirit and was collected for burial on the Sith homeworld of Korriban, where his soul could be contacted with a holocron of his own creation. The human male, who would one day be known as Darth Nihilus, Dark Lord of the Sith, was alive at the conclusion of the Mandalorian Wars, a galaxy-wide conflict between the Mandalorian Neo-Crusaders and the Galactic Republic. Amidst those battles, he lost everything, his family, friends, and as well as his will to live. He was part of the planet of Malachor V during the final battle of the war in 3960 BBY, when the General Jedi Mitra Surik gave the order to activate the Republic's Mass Shadow Generator superweapon. The generator killed almost everyone on the planet's surface and in orbit nearby. The future Dark Lord survived the superweapon's destruction on the surface and assumed a dark persona while grieving his losses. In part of his means of survival, he was trapped on the planet by the artificially created mass shadows along with the bulk of the opposing disabled fleets that filled space around the planet, where the Mandalorians had committed all of their forces in one last attempt at defeating the Republic and took ill suddenly due to the shadow's effect. His emotional pain then manifested as an emptiness that swept over the man's idle body, and it soon began to manifest as an intense hunger without intent. He drained the life force of another survival. The act was an unpleasant experience for him, but the hunger in his painful memories faded for a brief moment alongside his sickness. Nonetheless, the emptiness returned more relentless and severe than before. He indulged in absorbing the energy of the other survivors, but the more he fed, the stronger hunger was appeased and the more powerful it became. After the Dark Lord of the Sith, Darth Malak, was killed at the Jedi Civil War conclusion in 3956 BBY, the Sith Empire became divided, and its followers turned on each other, with many factions rising to stake claim to what little power could be garnered. The man was eventually discovered by the Dark Lord Darth Treya, who had sensed him as a wound in the Force. After locating him, Treya explained that it was the Force that fueled his hunger and offered to train him to devour the entire world to help appease his hunger at her school on the planet. The Treya's Academy, he followed her there and learned the ways of the Sith alongside another prospective Sith. Treya's hungry pupil and her other apprentice each owned different aspects of skills of the dark side of the Force, until they both became Sith Lords. The man who took up the name Darth Nihilus, while the second apprentice became known as Darth Sion, and they joined with Treya in creation of a Sith Triumvirate. In addition, the three each took unique titles, with Nihilus selecting Lord of Hunger. Darth Treya perceived Nihilus's hunger for the Force as detrimental to the Sith goals. Nevertheless, she taught him how to harness that hunger to make him stronger for a time. As she had promised, Nihilus consumed planets on several occasions, caring only to appease his hunger, allowing the dark side to consume him more and more each time. He indulged his ever-intensifying hunger. Alongside his hunger, his power also grew dramatically, until he was eventually surpassed his master. Their views on how to destroy the Jedi Order also became divided, with Sion and Nihilus wanting to destroy them outright, while Treya desired a more time-consuming approach. This strained the Triumvirate's already fragile alliance to the breaking point. In 3955 BBY, Nihilus and Sion combined their forces to challenge Treya, confronting their teacher in the center of her own academy. Sion and Nihilus entered the core and ambushed Treya. Nihilus' force pushed her into a feature of the platform, in which Sion lapparated her into submission. Sion combined his power with Nihilus's to sap Treya's force energy, cutting her off from the Force before casting her out into exile. With Treya gone, the Sith were left with no defined leadership, and her followers fractured into many factions once again, all seeking to take what little remained. Meanwhile, the two Sith Lords went about destroying the Jedi Order together, though they did so separately and with different vehicles. On one hand, Sion killed as many Jedi as he could find. On the other, Nihilus traveled the fringes of known space with a large fleet of ships that he had ripped from the mass shadows surrounding Malachor V. He made one such vessel, the Ravager, his flagship, and led his flotilla to the largest deposits of Force energies he could find, whereupon he satiated the hunger within him and further increased his power. Both Nihilus and Sion were successful in their pursuits, and they extinguished the Jedi 4 years after Treya's exile. Nihilus and Sion have been the ones who defeated her, reunited the fractured Sith to take control. Nihilus became so absorbed by the dark side of the Force and his hunger that his physical body began to erode. Knowing that he would succumb to death if he did not act soon, Nihilus ripped his spirit from his body and encased it in the armor he wore, thus allowing the dark side to consume his useless body. Using the Force, the Sith Lord was able to keep his robes, armor, and mask together, giving him some form while allowing him to use his Force powers as well as a lightsaber. Apart from that, he no longer had a physical form and became simple, primitive intent. Additionally, the Dark Lord constructed a cubic holocron at some point that contained the sum of Sith knowledge and a number of their secrets. The Treya's Academy continued producing legions of Sith Lords, assassins, and marauders, with Sion and Nihilus at its head. They spread death throughout the galaxy and turned many other Force sensitives to their cause. What his followers experienced while simply being in Nihilus's vicinity allowed them to leech off of other Force sensitives' Force energy, increasing their own power. He also taught them how to sense their prey across the vastness of space. In 3952 BBY, the Jedi Master Atris organized a large gathering of Jedi on the Mariluka colony world of Katarr, which most of the remaining Jedi were expected to attend. After organizing the event, she then leaked the location as a ploy to lure a dark present that she had recently sent so that she could destroy it. Atris's plan worked, drawing Nihilus toward Katarr. However, when Nihilus neared the planet, he spoke, his voice a great hunger that the Mariluka could see and feel through the Force. The Sith Lord's hunger overwhelmed them and obliterated the surface of Katarr. wiping out the entire colony and anything else touched by the Force. Nihilus destroyed much of what remained of the Jedi Order, including the Jedi Masters Zar Lestin, Dorak, and Vendar Torque. Atris herself did not actually attend the conclave, though she was reported to have done so. As he afterward walked on the surface of Katarr, Nihilus found only a single living being, an injured Marluka woman named Visas Mar. He put her in a deep sleep and brought her aboard his ship. Days later, Mar awoke completely healed aboard the Ravager and approached by the Dark Lord. When she asked him why the wave of death had spared her, the Sith Lord did not speak. Instead, he showed her a vision of the galaxy as he perceived it. Beings on other planets unable to feel the Force, disconnected from one another and lost in the crush of humanity. To that chaos, the Dark Lord felt he brought order. The vision crippled her ability to see through the Force and carved out the flesh of her vestigial eye sockets. Mara agreed to be trained by the Sith Lord as his shadow hand and developed a powerful Force bond with Nihilus that strengthened both. Further, they could support or weaken each other in battle. Nihilus allied himself with General Vaklu, the leader of a separatist movement that wanted the planet of Onderon to leave the Galactic Republic. He wanted to aid Vaklu in breaking away from the Republic so the planet would fall under his influence and become the staging ground for the Sith. Colonel Tobin, Vaklu's second-in-command, became Nihilus's contact. The Sith Lord also established a base on Onderon's moon, Duxon, inside a tomb of an ancient Dark Lord of the Sith named Freedom Nad. The tomb contained a dark energy force nexus upon which Nihilus hoped to feed after his underlings performed a dark side ritual to influence the outcome of the upcoming Onderon civil war between the Separatists and the Onderon Royalists to his favor. In another part of the galaxy, events that would culminate in Darth Nihilus' ultimate defeat took place when Atris, intent on using her bait for Nihilus, arranged for the return of Mitra Surik to Republic space in 3951 BBY. Surik had been exiled by the Jedi years before the fighting in the Mandalorian Wars. Atris broadcast the knowledge of Surik's presence through the Coward database, which reached Darth Sion. Nihilus' colleague then pursued her to the Paragas mining facility, which was destroyed as a result. The Telos Restoration Project, an expensive pilot program for repairing the Mandalorian War's collateral damage, lost its main supply of fuel, which bolstered support for the public secessionist movement on the planets like Onderon. Surik came under the tutelage of Nihilus' former master, who had forsaken her Sith identity of Darth Trey and retaken her original name, Kreia, following her exile. Kreia now planned to use Surik against the Sith Lords to achieve her revenge, and Surik set out on a quest to find any Jedi Masters who had survived the Mandalorian War so that they could take the fight to the Sith Lords who had destroyed the Order. Nihilus eventually felt a disturbance in the Force that only his apprentice could identify. As a result, Mar was sent to defeat its source, Surik, and bring the woman before Nihilus so that he could consume her. When Surik defeated Mar, instead Marluka began to question the vision her master had shown her. She was then swayed to serve Surik against Nihilus. The ritual Nihilus' group were conducting on Duxon was attacked by a group sent by Surik when she involved herself with the now ongoing Onderon civil war, with hope from Mandalore to preserve her and his Mandalorian clan that lived in secret on Duxon. The practitioners were killed, but not before the ritual was completed. Meanwhile, Surik headed to Isis to support Onderon's queen Talia. The royalist leader's palace was invaded by Nihilus' Sith and the Separatists. Surik turned the tide in the royalist favor, and Nihilus' plans for Onderon were thwarted when General Vaklu was executed summarily and the Separatists were quashed. Afterward, Nihilus was informed by Colonel Tobin that there was a Jedi Academy on the planet of Telos IV. This was actually a ruse by Kreia to draw her former pupil there while she traveled to reclaim her academy on Malachor. Nihilus' forces, comprised of servants who had been reduced to mindlessness by prolonged exposure to the Dark Lord and Sith warriors, made their way to the planet. The Republic Navy was there to ambush the fleet as it approached, working with the Mandalorians who were there to assist Surik and their Mandalore. Thus begun the Battle of Telos IV, a large conflict with fronts on both Citadel Station, the planet's orbiting satellite, and space. Nihilus realized too late that the Academy was not actually populated by Force sensitives, though Atris, the headmistress, but his ravaging hunger drove him to attempt to consume Telos anyway. Afterward, Nihilus was informed by Colonel Tobin that there was a Jedi Academy on the planet of Telos IV. This was actually a ruse by Kreia to draw her former pupil there while she traveled to reclaim her academy on Malachor. Nihilus' forces, comprised of servants who had been reduced to mindlessness by prolonged exposure to the Dark Lord and Sith warriors, made their way to the planet. The Republic Navy was there to ambush the fleet as it approached, working with the Mandalorians who were there to assist Surik and their Mandalore. Thus begun the Battle of Telos IV, a large conflict with fronts on both Citadel Station, the planet's orbiting satellite, and space. Nihilus realized too late that the Academy was not actually populated by Force sensitives, though Atris, the headmistress, but his ravaging hunger drove him to attempt to consume Telos anyway. During his confrontation with the Exile, Mar, and Mandalore, Nihilus attempted to absorb Surik's Force energy, but failed and exhausted himself because of Surik's ability to draw on the Force energy of those around her. They engaged in a brief duel with the Dark Lord seemingly too strong to defeat. Mar entered a trance and disrupted her link with her former master, undermining his connection to the Force through their Force bond. This weakened Nihilus enough that the trio was able to kill him before leaving the orbital shuttle she and her companions had used to board the ship. Mar felt compelled to remove the Dark Lord's mask, wanting to see the face of one who had wounded her. Nihilus's body then erupted in an aura of dark side energies as the trio left the bridge. Shortly thereafter, the bombs aboard the Ravager exploded, and the rest of the Sith fleet was decimated by the Republic. Nihilus's spirit was able to survive inside his armor, not destroyed within the Ravager, which had taken for burial on Korriban, the Sith homeworld. Nihilus's spirit touched the planet's dark side nexus and remained in touch with the corporeal plane because of it. After Nihilus's defeat, Major Surik traveled to Malachor V and killed both Kreia, who claimed her place as Darth Traya, along with the Academy and Sion. Nonetheless, the Sith lived on after the fall of the Sith Triumvirate. At least one Sith Lord rose to succeeded Nihilus, quietly ruling as the Republic began to thrive anew. Similarly, the Jedi Order rebounded as well, with Mar and other Force-sensitive companions of the Exile rebuilding it in 3681 BBY. The Sith and the Jedi would once again clash in the Great Galactic War that pitted the Republic against the resurgent Sith Empire, and in aftermath of that conflict, the two shared an uneasy coexistence during the Cold War that began in 3653 BBY. The subsequent decades saw replicas of Darth Nihilus' mask and cowl worn by galactic citizens. Darth Nihilus' holocron, which could allow someone to commune with his spirit, was centuries old when it came into the possession of a crime lord, Daigo Hickson, who kept it in a cavern on the planet of Tatooine called the Light Spring during the Cold War. A Sith, Vavron Zer, learned that Hickson had the box, and she aimed to claim it for the Sith Empire. To do this, she tried to enlist the aid of the smuggler, later known as Voidhound, without revealing its true nature. However, the smuggler supported the Galactic Republic and told a Jedi Knight, Narrow Prudence, that Zer was seeking the box. The Jedi sought out to take the box alone and was captured by Hickson, but the smuggler had followed her. In ensuring confrontation, Hickson and Zer, who had arrived as well, were killed by the smuggler and the Jedi. Prudence was able to determine the origin of the holocron, and she set off to ensure the Empire would never see it. Before the formation of the Galactic Empire in 19 BBY, Jedi Master Bodo Boss knew that the three conflicting tales of Darth Nihilus' fate. One stated that he had been saved by Brianna, another companion of Surik's, who was on Telos' surface when Nihilus was killed. The other two purported that either Mar killed Nihilus or vice versa. Boss recorded these in his holocron, from which his knowledge would be transcribed to Jedi vs. Sith, The Essential Guide to the Force, by Jedi Master Tion Sulfur several decades later. While the Empire was in power, three groups tracked Nihilus' mask to the planet of Volok and the unknown regions, stored aboard the dynamic class freighter called Neshuga. These parties, a group of spacers Sith cultists known as the Apex Society, and a brand of pirates called Sando's Boys, all convened in around the cove where the ship resided. After dispatching the two other groups, the spacers claimed the mask for their own. The founder of one Sith Order, Darth Kreia, came upon Nihilus' holocron in 1307 ABY. Kreia traveled to Korriban and accessed it along with two others belonging to Darth Anandu and Darth Bane, seeking their advice on how to stop these involved creatures from consuming his body. The only response he received was from Nihilus was a statement in the Sith Lord's language, which his comrades did not attempt to translate. but the three were in agreement. They believed that Katarr was unworthy of being a Sith, as they saw his rule as a dilution of the Sith ways.
Darth Nihilus was a man who always craved greater power. However, unlike most Sith Lords, he cared very little for the Sith as an organization. Nihilus saw death as the sole purpose of life, and power as the means to achieve it. He was cautious, as his actions during the campaign against the Jedi showed, and was known as an aggressive, dominant figure who would not abide a threat to his power. Nihilus was once a human male with black hair coiled finely into strips that he had tied behind his head. After he indulged his hunger for the dark side, he lost his corporeal form, preserving his existence only by having his spirit linger within his mask and armor. The Dark Lord fully embraced this condition, as the mysteriously monstrous facets of it installed in people who met him with a deep rooted fear upon which he could prey. Ceasing to feel fear and other emotions, he became an entity of pure intent. Nonetheless, Nihilus was still human enough to have some feelings, as his bond with Mara persisted until their confrontation on the Ravager. She was his only apprentice, and her betrayal was met with much anger. Darth Nihilus wielded a self-made lightsaber containing a red synthetic crystal. During combat, Darth Nihilus fought in an aggressive, one-handed style he had learned from some of the greatest Sith teachings, but such practices took the form of dependence. They would make him stronger, but only for a time, and he would have to feed upon Force energy to replenish his strength. For this reason, Force sensitives and wolves rich in the Force would draw him. His reach in the Force eventually extended to the point where he could feel Force users throughout the galaxy to find planets he would then cleanse entirely, killing everything who was touched by the Force. Prolonged use of this power made him a threat to all life. As his craving grew more intense with each feeding, eventually Nihilus's hunger controlled him, not the other way around. And the Sith Lord would instinctively feed upon those around him, slowly killing them. Nihilus's very speech caused pain and death to all who heard it, and those who served him became utter slaves in time. His ability was somewhat similar to Trey's influence upon others. The reconvinced Jedi Council and the Jedi Enclave on Dantooine inferred that the Sith had somehow learned the ability to feed on the Force from her. Darth Nihilus was adept in many aspects of the Force. He used his dark variant of the Server Force ability to betray Darth Trey alongside Darth Sion by stripping her of the Force and casting her out of the Sith Orders. Nihilus could also use the Force to lift starships, as he did on Malachor V with the Ravager. He tore it from the mass shadows that surrounded the planet and kept it together, even though it had suffered extensive structural damage. Through the Force, Darth Nihilus was able to escape death by containing his consciousness in his armor, an ability that Darth Krayt would acquire of Nihilus's holocrons millennia later. He was also proficient in Dark Rage, Force Sight, Force Lightning, Force Resistance, and Force Scream, and Force Whirlwind, among others, such as the Dark variant of Force Healing, called Dark Healing. His knowledge also extended to Sith alchemy. During the Second Battle of Onderon, Nihilus's sect of Sith followers used techniques that would bend tame beasts to their will. Nihilus could increase the strength of Force powers he used greatly if he wished, and he was capable of reaching through the Force at a range as far as a star. I hope you guys enjoyed the first episode of Star Wars lore. I know the audio fluctuates. This was recorded over a different period of time, different times of the day, so I had to be quieter, louder. And also, my mic position changed quite a bit as I'm using a raised headset. I will try to keep the audio stable and less loud or quiet at certain parts, but please let me know in feedback within the comments if you'd like to see more. I would like to do one on Revan, Sion, and Treya if I were to do any more. Yeah, have a nice night. Keep it better.